It didn't work. Not under the conditions we're told it worked.
Because when I look at those, I just see those oval windows. They came right out of a DC-9.
It's easier to do something that had been used before.
With the rubber seal on there, and they wouldn't work with the rubber seal.
There are so many things wrong with it. These professors of physics, these doctors of science, these PhDs, these people who studied science, you'd think they'd have spotted some of these things by now, but no. If they have spotted them, they're not talking about them because they daren't talk about them, because so many people would criticize them, because this story of Apollo is almost holy writ. It's almost something that you cannot deny. If you do, you're a heretic. And we know what happened to heretics.
Yeah.
Copernicus, Galileo, they suffered as a result of challenging the dominant force at the time, the church, the organized church.
Yeah.
Same thing now. We have it's called scientism. And if you challenge any of the accepted dogma in the science that we are taught, you're a heretic and you're cast out and you're not allowed to then earn money as a scientist. They're basically moral cowards, these people who will not say what is really happening. But what we talk about here is something that anybody can investigate, anybody can find the information. There's no secret information there at all. This is all easily available.
They don't even realize it's there. Like I said, years ago, I could read a technical document and everything sounds good, looks good, whatever. Yeah. Okay, you can study that thing upside down and there's the image of whatever you're studying and here's all the technical data on it. But you don't realize that the thing that actually doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work.
But it's right there in black and white when you read it.
In theory, it'll work. These people who criticize the fact that, well, NASA produced these millions of pages of documentation, how could they do that if it was a fake? What a stupid thing to say. It's not even logical. It's a logical fallacy.
All of those people were actually working on it, assuming that everything that they were working on, when they put it all together, it all comes together and it works.
Yes, exactly.
Right? And a good piece of it does. I mean, you build the rover, you can make the thing run.
Yeah, build the rover, it'll probably work. And we've got that thing called the Grover.
Yeah.
The gravity rover.
And I mean, they build these spacesuits, they put one guy in it, he passed out, and that's as far as that went. LeBlanc.
He was tested in a vacuum, wasn't he?
He went down fast. He wasn't even into outer space. I mean, like he's like 60, 70,000 feet. And then it's never done again.
Because they don't dare, because of the effect it had. He said that the moisture on his tongue started to boil.
But why wouldn't they be doing it 100 more times to make sure that they never have another failure? That never happened.
I mean, Elon Musk in a spacesuit, did you see that little advert that he put out? The spacesuits will work in a vacuum, they'll work well. They'll work okay. But they've never been tested in a vacuum of that magnitude.
Who built the suits? NASA?
Well, of course not. It was the special effects industry in Hollywood that designed the suits.
That's absolutely perfect. That's all we have to hear in there, just to have that it was done by special effects.
We've all seen The Martian, we've seen Gravity, we've seen many of Hollywood's special effects films, and they're very persuasive. Until you see the harnesses that the actors have to use to create low gravity.
They don't even have to do that anymore. There was a couple of fellows there that put a YouTube video out, and they did everything. And you'd swear they were floating through hatchways and working equipment. As a matter of fact, all the equipment that they made it with, they put the eBay number and the links to the stuff so you could go and purchase it yourself.
Let me just mention one of my heroes in this game, Jay Windley of Clavius.org, who claims he is a scientist, and he moderates his moon hoax discussion panel, and he has lots of people on there agreeing with him, all of whom are anonymous, all of whom don't use their real name. I mean, even Jay Windley doesn't use his real name. He calls himself Jay Utah, because that's where he lives, Salt Lake City. Then you've got the Mythbusters show, which has nothing to do with science, it's everything to do with entertainment. As Jamie Hyneman said when asked by Jarrah White, is your show to do with science? And he said, no, it's entertainment. And Mythbusters managed to find out where the alleged reflectors on the moon were and fired lasers at them. But if you realize that one of the only 2 currently operating observatories that have these lasers, one was called the Apache Point Lunar Observatory Lunar Landing Operation, spelling Apollo, which was only set up in 2009, you wonder what on earth they're playing at. Because there's supposed to be 38 observatories around the world that can do this. No, they can't. I've not seen any report from any other observatory. The only other one that I know of that produces it is the McDonald Observatory in New Mexico. It's all ridiculous. And then you find out that it was being done in 1963 by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. You realize that this whole business of reflectors on the lunar surface was just yet another activity by NASA to try to convince people that somebody had put them there. No, they didn't. The Russians did it with an unmanned spacecraft.
Well, that's one of their most convincing arguments when they're defending themselves. That's one of their main ones. We can get a signal back from our reflectors that we put there.
Yes, that's what they say. Until somebody looked into it and found out that you don't need a reflector. You just fire a powerful enough laser at the moon and you get a signal back. But none of these parrots managed to determine how long and how difficult it is where the Earth is spinning, the moon is spinning, the moon is moving in relation to the Earth. How do they keep the laser pointed at the exact same spot? They don't tell you that because it would spoil the story, because the story is complete fiction. And then the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter photographs of 2009, well, we know that they're photoshopped. As Robert has said, it's easy to do it. It's not a problem to create wheel tracks on a picture of the lunar surface. Anybody can do it.
Yes, and the rest of those other little dots there are nothing more than pixie dust.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they got a great big arrow pointing at a little tiny dot.
Yeah.
And they write down whatever it is, and they go, oh, okay, it's just some more pixie dust that they threw on there, and put an arrow to it.
Yeah, and the parrots are forever saying, oh, look, they proved that they landed on the moon. No, they didn't. They proved that they could Photoshop stuff. That's all they did. Those pictures weren't even taken on the moon.
Here's the one thing, though, is what NASA has laid down. They have laid down what a spacecraft looks like that can go intergalactic. So it looks like a shanty shack. The image of the lunar surface in the videos and in the photographs, I guarantee you that the lunar surface looks a whole lot different. So if we do actually get images back, like either film or photographs or whatever back, and it looks completely different than that. If it's got 6 feet of dust everywhere and you can't even take a picture because of it, because the cosmic dust that would be landing on everything because there's absolutely nothing to disturb it, you wouldn't see a bare rock anywhere.
No, you wouldn't. There'd be dust on top of all the rocks.
Even if you, because I know you're not accustomed to snow, but a fresh fall of snow covering over everything would be about the same thing that you would see, except this dust in areas that haven't been disturbed for billions of years could be many meters thick. And there are documents discussing that very thing back in the 1920s and 30s, right? There are documents on that discussing these theories on it. Their image of what the lunar surface is, they have embedded in us repeatedly. It's on everything. It's every day. You're going to see a picture of the lunar surface if you watch television, because it's in advertising. It's everywhere. It's in magazines. It's for kids' cereals. It doesn't matter what it is. It's even for car advertising. I saw one the other day using the lunar rover. That's how NASA keeps putting it out there, and they've got the budget to do it. So they're keeping people in the rabbit hole. But the reality is, those images of that surface are not anything like what the moon is going to be like. That's no different than a Hollywood image that is created.
One day, somebody, probably a Chinese, will get back to the moon and will look at it and say, it's not at all like what I thought it would look like. Well, there's Apollo photographs for real. And a lot of people will then start wondering about it. And NASA don't dare allow that to happen, which is why they continue to insert themselves into actually every space program around, whether it's the Israeli, whether it's the Indian or the Chinese or the Japanese. NASA has a major input to try to ensure that they don't blow the whistle. They don't expose NASA's fraudulent behavior. But eventually it will happen.
Not my lifetime, that's for sure. Yep. Even if they do put something on the moon, they'll say, oh, we're on the far side of the moon, or we're on the poles, or wherever that you can't see with the telescope, right? Oh, it looks different here. We happen to be in this crater because it was unique.
Those excuses can only go on for so long, and eventually there will be enough people like us. I mean, maybe we're the pioneers here. We're asking the right questions. We're looking at the right information and asking the right questions. That's called thinking critically, thinking scientifically. We make mistakes. I make mistakes. I'm sure everybody makes mistakes. Just because we make a mistake doesn't mean to say that everything we say is wrong. It isn't. Everything we say can be confirmed. I try not to say anything that I cannot produce the evidence for it. When we say that photographic film cannot work in a vacuum, we can show NASA say the same thing.
Exactly. Well, that's one of the biggest things about showing any evidence to it. It's like, those are NASA's photographs.
Yeah.
Why should anybody become annoyed at me? There's no reason to become annoyed at me. I did not take the photograph.
But you know what people are forgetting here is that the article that we put up on the AULA site with the photography showing what happens, and this is only at around 75,000 feet, and the tint, the hues, the colors wash out, all these kind of strange things happen. And then another film strip, I also gave a 1-second burst of 2 gigs worth of radiation from the microwave oven, just to see what would happen, and it's all fogged. Now, if this is what happens at 75,000 feet to film, what is going to happen when that film is out there in values of 10 to the 10 minus 3, minus 6, and you get to the moon, it's minus 11, minus 12, depending on what you read. They say, well, we don't really see that much of a difference, and yeah, well, you can see a difference. You just have to look. What we did was show what happens at 70 to 75,000 feet, and it only takes a little bit of common sense to say, hey, this is what happens, and now what's going to happen when that's on the moon?
People, you show them something, and they get upset, but you're showing it from NASA. And if I open up a PDF file and say, look, they've modified it. I didn't modify it. NASA did. They're putting up misinformation on themselves sometimes, I think, so they can get people to argue about it. But in the photographs, in the film footage, NASA produced that. If you want to be upset, get upset with NASA. Don't get upset with anybody else. When I sit there and show you that's a wet flag, you can deny it, you can do whatever, it's still a wet flag. But I didn't take the photograph, and I didn't post it online for everybody to see. You want to get upset? Go ahead, call NASA. Ask them what the hell is up with this photograph. How did that flag get wet? Show them that mud on that piece of foil laying on the ground there, all covered and cracked and falling apart, and say, how did you do that? Show them Buzz Aldrin on that thing and show them that there's no control panel inside that model they put up, and say, how dare you have the balls to do that even when you're trying to fake it and simulate it? How dare you get that sloppy with it, right? But don't blame it on anybody else. Don't get angry at anybody else because they saw it and then showed it to you, because it's right there.
And this is where Stanley Kubrick goes right out the door.
Yeah.
Because he would not have allowed such mistakes to occur, not in any of his productions.
Any of that footage is completely amateurish when you're looking at it. And of course, when you start looking at all of the other pieces of equipment there and see that the central station has nothing in it, it's just a piece of junk sitting there with a oil furnace starter on the side of it, pilot starter on the side of the thing with a cord running off. The thing they call the RTG is sitting there. It needs 2 or 3 other pieces of equipment to make it function as a generating station to run the equipment and charge the battery. There's at least 2 pieces completely missing from that have to be there to make it run. You just can't grab that power off of there and charge a battery up. You need to have a rectifier in there to start with and a voltage regulator. And that's with all of the pieces of equipment.
Here's the thing with that piece of equipment. It's got the computer in it. It has the regulator in it. It's got the inverter in it. But here's the thing. It's a computer. How come that computer can lay flat down on the lunar surface right in the sunlight when the temperature, now we're talking about induction here, right? That is going to be 250 degrees Fahrenheit where that computer's sitting.
I would think the radiation coming off the surface would completely just shatter any transmission that the computer would be having. It would just destroy it.
Yeah, because when the ISS orbits the Earth and it orbits into the South Atlantic anomaly, which is over Brazil, they have to switch the computers off in case they get short-circuited. That's what radiation does to electronics. It doesn't do it any good at all. So there's a lot of stories about computers in space. They have to be particularly well built. They have to be hardened against the radiation. So why weren't they hardened on Apollo? Because they didn't know that they had to do it.
Because NVIDIA was contracted to do all the graphics and stuff for the International Space Station, right? And they just said, oh, it's not a big enough project. There's so few pieces that we're building for them. It's not worth our time. Yeah. And yet I've got the PDF files showing how rapidly their graphics cards were destroyed by radiation.
Yeah, because they weren't designed to operate in radiation because nobody told them that they had to be.
Like I said, NASA asked them and said, here's the radiation numbers, try build graphic cards for us. They tried, failed, and said, we're not getting anywhere. We can't build anything to protect against that radiation, so we just canceled the contract. So as an alternate, they put up that little video that they did.
The trouble is they got found out because they know it was a brilliantly executed propaganda exercise. The whole Apollo missions were designed for one purpose, which it was successful in. Let's not forget that. But let's not fool ourselves that because it was propaganda, that suddenly becomes real science. So where are these scientists who can now call them out on it? They're not there. Or they're just parroting what NASA has said that they should say.
They were successful at doing, I guess, was to refocus the population of the United States from all of the problems that they were having, the racial problems and Vietnam and the whole 9 yards and all their other politics, and they focused together because they were well behind after the Second World War. Other countries were advancing much quicker. They were well behind in everything. So that money that went into there was a big infrastructure bill for them to go in. And that's why all 50 states, everything was being built right across all 50 states. They all got a piece of the pie. And that brought the United States up on an economic level. And instead of them arguing about what they're doing today, if they looked at that and how that worked, they'd be all for it to bring themselves back one more time. Because they were falling behind. I mean, Japan, even Taiwan. I mean, you could buy a little pocket radio from Taiwan in the 60s, right? How did they get the technology? U.S. couldn't build it. They weren't building anything. Even when they must have realized in the early 60s, even when Honda started building motorcycles and shipping them across the United States, and people are gobbling them up, and all they've got is big old iron motorcycles running, and then people are buying millions of these bloody bikes, right? And they're going, we're behind, because even Japan, that they devastated in the Second World War, is coming up economically ahead of them. A little weak country as well. Not just that. And you can see the problem that the ego of the United States has is, holy Christ, we got to do something here, right? I think that's what really prompted it to kick that much money out. Focus everybody on one thing. Give everybody jobs. Like, they basically gave 10% of the population a job, but if you realize that that transfers through a hell of a lot farther than that, because there's families of 4 or 5 that they're now supporting, right? It brought the entire economy up.
When we say that photographic film cannot work in a vacuum, we can show NASA say the same thing.
Why should anybody become annoyed at me? There's no reason to become annoyed at me. I did not take the photograph. I did not scan it and put it online for everybody to see.
Quite right, quite right, quite right, quite right.